Brewtallyspeaking podcast is proudly sponsored by rockabilia.com. For over 30 years, Rockabilia has been the go-to destination for all things band merch. With over 500,000 items in their online store and collaborations with today's hottest bands, you're sure to find something you love. Use our code BREW10 at checkout and take 10% off your total order. So go pick up your favorite new piece of merch now over at rockabilia.com. And now, on to the show.
Say you have to have a lot of passion for what you're doing. This rings true because it's so hard that if you don't, any rational person would give up. It's really hard, and you have to do it over a sustained period of time. So if you don't love it, and if you're not having fun doing it, you're gonna give up.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Brewtallyspeaking podcast. I am your host, John, and this episode's guest is Hayley Roughton, vocalist of Gore. Their debut EP, A Bud That Never Blooms, is out now via Spine Farm Records. This was a really fun one, and I was looking forward to doing this chat for a multitude of reasons. And honestly, I feel like as I get older and all those things, that the way we find things, new music, new forms of entertainment, just anything quote unquote new, I feel like by the time we actually find out about it, it's been around for a while, it's old. You don't really get to experience new things in real time as they're actually unfolding, from my perspective anyway. And Gore is one of those bands that was so hot on the lips of like everybody, between fellow podcasters, people who were in other bands, people who are really into like checking out music, like really active on the various weekly playlists that come out with like new and upcoming bands and so forth, and was a band that a lot of people were sending my way and having me check out, thinking, obviously I would enjoy what they're doing. And so imagine my surprise getting the email saying that the band was doing some press, and I leapt at the opportunity. And the more I kind of was digging into the band stuff to try to find something to kind of discuss and talk about, I realized this really is the beginning of this band. The singles that were coming out at the time, I think there was only three of them, I think, at the time, out of the 5 that ended up making the EP, and was a thing where it's like the band had no shows. I don't even think they had merch at the time, and it just was a thing where it was like, oh my God, this is like a brand new band. And even though everyone's been talking about them, like, here we are at the the beginning of whatever this band will continue to do moving forward. And it's just so rare to kind of have that experience, being 40 now and having been doing this for 8 years. You don't get to have that opportunity very often to kind of be at the ground floor of something that you feel is going to be big. And I think the other thing that kind of, and I'll put the caveat on this and say this is possibly just my own perception of this, but it's something that when the chat was done, I kind of felt this, and I felt like I was going to have to explain myself. So when doing a little bit of the research and looking for stuff to talk to Hayley about, something that I had found through combing through some social media and stuff like that for interesting talking points, even if it's just to me, was that she is a spacewalk engineer for NASA. And I can tell you, still as I'm sitting here doing this intro, about a month and a half after we did this conversation, I still really don't know what the job is. But to me, anytime I see the words NASA or an engineer and someone does something in that space, literally and figuratively, I just assume that it requires one's like sole focus. And I guess that's sort of predicated on my wife's job, working in the pharmaceutical, sterile injectable pharmaceutical drugs and so forth, and seeing the process that she's gone through, being one of the first handful of employees at this startup company to now, I think she was like employee 6 or 7, and now they have like 200 and something employees and have just expanded onto several facilities and on-sites and all this kind of stuff, and seeing the level of work that goes into it, where it's super long nights. It was sometimes showing up at 3-4 o'clock in the morning because an alarm went off in one of the facilities and so forth. And it's just a all-encompassing job at times. Obviously, as things have gone on, more employees have come on and stuff like that. There are other people in place to ensure that the job's getting done, and you don't have to wear as many hats. But to me, like I said, seeing that firsthand, it was like, oh shit, this is wild. And then over the years, I would say my wife is a little bit different than most of the people at her job, given the fact that, she goes to, metal shows and stuff like that. And a lot of the people that she works with don't understand that scene, that space. So much to the fact that I thought it was kind of amusing. She was talking about an employee that had been hired in recent time, and one of the things as they were kind of getting to know this candidate at the time for employment was that they go to metal shows, they love being in the pit and all this kind of stuff, and a lot of people were just like, okay, and like seem very like, I don't understand that, that's not my world. And then Bridget was like, oh, well, who do you go see? What if, and then they were like, oh, I went and saw like Knocked Loose, and I saw these bands and so on and so forth. And it just kind of made me think and reassess sort of like just, this is the perception of those of us that are into this style of music, this lifestyle, for lack of a better term, and how it's still kind of looked at very weirdly. Like if you spend your time doing this, like that people in some of these career fields just have no understanding of what that's like. But I think the other side of it that I do know to be true from hanging out with my wife and some of our friends who are in various adjacent fields as well. And it's a thing we're listening to them all talk, coming from more science backgrounds, and especially in education and so forth, that's not normal. Like, that is not a normal thing. And with all of my wife's friends, obviously being mostly women, seeing how they are treated at their various jobs and so forth, and have been over the years. But it becomes this thing where I didn't want it to delve solely into, you're a female in a metal-ish band, what's that like? It was more I wanted to get the experience of like, I know nothing about your job, but I have a parallel like prism into my wife's field, and I feel like that's my only source of knowledge or perspective, I should say, of what it has been like. And so I was really wanting to get to the core of like, what did that look like? How has that been? Because I have seen from a differing side of things that it's still kind of looked at like, you like that music? You go to shows and do these things? And to me, I would imagine it's got to be a whole nother level of kind of maybe changing people's perceptions of who you are, because not only do I enjoy going to this, but I have a band. I am involved actively in creating this music and creating something within this scene that has given me so much. And what does that look like? And I don't think I really articulated it that well. And I don't know if I'm doing that well now currently, but that's where my head was at when I kind of was trying to figure out how to ask these questions. And I think it just kind of came across wrong because and maybe that's the learning point for me in all of this. I think as I've kind of been wrestling with how do I address this on the show in the preamble of sorts, but it's like, maybe that is the takeaway is I felt awkward because I was trying so hard not to diminish or belittle someone just based on a gender or a job or anything like that, but trying to get to understand more of something I don't know. And so that's sort of the unfortunate thing, I think, sometimes of trying to do this spur of the moment off the top of my head. Like when something comes to me, I may not be able to articulate the questions I want as well as I want to in that time. And in this situation, I feel like it made me be like I would say most everyone else is going to fixate on these things. And for that, I apologize. If it comes across that way, I apologize, but definitely not my intent. And hopefully you still get something out of this, because I think Hayley did a great job of kind of trying to answer my bad question. But I think beyond that, I think it's really interesting to kind of be, like I said, in the very beginning, of being able to kind of talk to someone who's literally going through all these things sort of as a first. And, going back to that episode with Chris Lawrence from Hillhaven, we spent like an hour just talking about how did you as a new band choose to navigate getting signed, choosing not to sign with a label, management, all these things. So to see another like baby band kind of not have anyone that is known from other bands previously or anything like that, like kind of picking their brain about how did you choose the label? How are you choosing how to do everything? And how are you finding the process to be versus maybe how you thought it was going to be? I think is a really interesting one. So all of that to say, without further ado, let's get into my conversation with Hayley, and I'll talk to you on the other side of it. So I do got to say, I'm breaking one rule that I made for myself. Like, oh fuck, what was it, like 5 or 6 years ago? I did an interview with a band that essentially is in your same boat, where it's like, hey, we have a couple of songs. There's not a whole lot on the internet about you, and for doing something like this, it makes it infinitely more complicated because you're like, okay, what is something that you have been asked a ton that I have to steer clear of? And so far, I don't see a whole lot on your socials, the band's socials, or anything. So I guess I'll start right out with, is this band as new as it seems from across like a digital perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. So
Okay.
I originally was in a symphonic death metal band. And then when I departed from that band in 2022, I just decided that I was always joining other people's bands or other people's projects. And like, it's not that I didn't have a say in those projects, but I really wanted something of my own. So I started Gore, and we wrote that EP, me and my like co-writers and producers, we wrote that EP in January of 2023. I mean, it is that new for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, what always gets kind of interesting about that, and sometimes when it's a little bit harder to find information, or I should say when a publicist doesn't make a whole lot of other information readily available, it kind of begs the question of like, okay, are we trying to like hide some things? Like, where in some instances we don't want to talk about the old thing because it has nothing to do with whatever. There might have been some drama or whatever. So it's always one of those where I'm a bit trepidatious. I'm like, clearly this probably isn't your first thing, but also the information about where you came from isn't as available as I would have expected in this day, like I said, in this day and age. So it's always kind of one of those where I find it interesting because so much of our lives are led on the internet at this point that scrubbing shit clean essentially is kind of a miracle, because they say that those things last forever once you put it on the internet. So I'm always kind of intrigued at how that works.
Yeah, I think it's literally just we swiped our Instagrams and like other socials clean before the release of Babylon, just because we were kind of presenting a new era. That's as deep as that goes, really.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I know there's a couple of things out there about my old band, but we were pretty small, so there's not much.
Well, so that kind of leads me to an interesting talking point that I like to discuss, and I feel like a lot of it is my age, getting ready to be 40, and essentially having lived on the internet in its earliest infancy to now, where I feel like for me there's a lot of fatigue of not wanting to engage or really be active on socials much anymore, because kind of like if you've been doing press for decades or whatever, it's like, what more do I have to say that hasn't been said, really? And really it's just kind of a collection of memories for me. But what gets kind of interesting is I feel like there almost is, when I see bands or artists go through this thing where they just cleanse like a lot of their socials, I'm like, wow, what does that feel like? I feel like it just has to be so freeing, because instead of, I guess, being tied to the perception of who you may have thought you were or others may have thought you were based on something as insignificant as social media, what is it like to kind of go through a cleanse and kind of represent yourself to the world abroad?
Yeah, I mean, so on a level of actual significance, unless it's done over a long period of time, I'm not sure it makes too much of a difference. Like, obviously all of our fans that started with us from day one still know all of our content. And if everybody knows that, like, and anybody that knows Gore from, like, you know, when we first started knows that we push socials really hard. And it's not because I wanted to. Like, do you think I want to be making videos of myself every day? Absolutely fucking not. Like, I'm good. It's just that's the life that we live. And like, sometimes you have to do things you don't want to do in order to get the results that you do want. And I've never been afraid of the grind. So, but the rebranding is kind of nice. It kind of feels like a fresh start, even though, like you said, it isn't necessarily always a fresh start. But
Right.
We still very much are, you know, pushing on socials. It's just in kind of a different way now than when we first started.
And I promise this won't be solely about kind of a rebrand, a repackaging, and social media and stuff. But I think it's an interesting thing to take away, because when you, I guess it's because I kind of go through this thing where, like, I'm kind of wrestling with, like, how do I want to present myself? This like, essentially, when you kind of do something in this industry, you kind of have to become a brand, for lack of a better term. And there's so many things that you don't think about when you're just doing this initially. Like, I'm sure when you started a band, it was, I like music. I want to be in a band. I want to try this and write my own stuff and just see what kind of a voice, literally and figuratively, I have. And then from there, it's, well, I have to become a shipping expert for merch, and I have to be a touring logistics person, and I have to know finances and about, like, LLCs and DBAs and, like, all of these things. And when you get to touring internationally and stuff, like currency exchanges and stuff like that, that all these things have nothing to do with the impetus of where the love and passion started from. And so it gets kind of interesting when talking to someone who is in the midst of all of this stuff, like, how do you navigate this? How have you found the journey to be? But even more to the point, I think, in a rebrand, because it's something I went through a few years ago myself doing the show. And a lot of times I have, and even still, kind of struggle with, how much do I completely wipe away and rebrand to where only the rebrand is what exists, to what do we keep, almost kind of like your first music, where it's like you wouldn't erase your EP or your first couple of songs just because it's not who you are anymore. So it kind of creates this, like, duality of, like, where do I exist and how do I want to move forward? And I think, to me, like I said, thinking about your band and kind of how it's kind of came out of nowhere, and, like, even in the press bio, it's like, these bands are fans of this band. This is a band you really want to get to know. And it, like I said, it feels like, from the industry perspective, it just kind of comes out of nowhere. So it's like, how do you prepare for these things? How do you gauge the success when you're kind of restarting? And does it feel like you're restarting at zero, or does it kind of feel like a cheat code of sorts, where it's like, okay, I know it didn't work before. Let me kind of take what I've learned and now put it into what we're doing and see if there's growth where we can kind of start, you know, on first base, for lack of a better term.
I think there's a couple layers to that question, because, you know, you talked about, and being a musician is far more than just being a musician if you're a successful one.
Right.
But when it comes to the rebranding, I honestly wish I had an answer, but I don't. Like, I haven't been doing this very long. I'm still figuring out what works and what doesn't. You know, I think part of the strategy for us before, with just literally posting, kind of like, we were still trying to keep as high quality as we could, but posting every day, and that being a higher priority than, like, high quality posting, that has its ups and downs. Like, we definitely triggered the algorithm. We definitely got a lot of followers really quickly. But, you know, fans start to get annoyed about seeing the same stuff all the time, which, of course, was not necessarily our fault. We were holding off on a big announcement and trying to plan everything. And by the way, that announcement went faster than most label announcements go anyway. So, I think what I've learned is to not burn yourself out. Really, especially with social media. I mean, where we were sitting, I was kind of in charge of all of our socials and doing all the social media stuff, and it's kind of hard to sustain that and be a musician at the same time. So I think finding a balance between those as part of our rebranding has been pretty important. Like, okay, maybe you don't have to post 7 times a day or 7 times a week, but maybe 4 to 5 instead. Trying to find that happy medium, I think, has been really important. And it also, it's always good to be personable, but it does give off a bit more professionalism when you have a little bit less content, but it's higher quality. So.
Yeah, I think you're hitting on something that I think is kind of interesting. One would be almost a sense of boundaries that you set for yourself, either as a person or as in a professional setting of like, this is kind of what I'm willing to do, and these are my non-negotiables of like, I don't want to give too much. Yeah. And I think that's kind of when I was kind of talking earlier about like online fatigue. I feel like we probably all experience it in different realms. I think for me, it comes from more of the perspective of like, okay, how many more things do I have to keep up with? Like I started when it was like, coding and blogs and all this kind of shit, Zanga and all these kind of things back in the day, to now where it's like, I look at something like TikTok and I still, to my wife, like, I just go, I don't understand the point of this app. Like, I don't understand its function. Like, is it supposed to be short video? Like, it's too many things that I can't really figure out what it is. And then when I look at it from doing something like this, if the ultimate goal doesn't bring you to listen to the full episode, does it really serve a purpose for me? And I think that as I get older is kind of how I navigate a lot of things of like, what is it bringing to me? What is the ROI in my life for this thing? And if it's not really adding value, then I don't need it. And I don't have a problem with kind of being like, this needs to just not exist for me. And I feel like I've been remiss a little bit to not ask like the duality of maybe your day job, quote unquote, your day job. How do you find the balance of something from a layman, from myself? Like, I don't know how involved aerospace engineering is. I imagine it's pretty in depth and there's a lot to it. Do you find that like it's hard right now to kind of maybe balance the day job and balance the passion and the career that's kind of budding right now?
Yeah, it can be harder sometimes than others. Like during the release, I definitely had to set like work boundaries. Like, hey, I have to work during these hours and I can't necessarily tend to this. And, I'm getting up at 5 a.m. and going to bed at 11 p.m. because there's so much to do and I'm essentially working 2 jobs. Then there are other times where, in between releases where it's not necessarily as busy and it's totally doable. For setting boundaries as far as my day job goes, that's on a day-to-day basis, relatively easy, in my opinion. Like I've gotten into the habit of, well, it's easy, but with huge sacrifice. Once you make the huge sacrifices, it's easy. But and to paraphrase that, I don't really have a social life. I don't have that many friends. The friends that I do have don't even live where I live. I keep up with them online, when I can. I don't see my family that often. So I sacrifice pretty much all my time. But on weekends, I'll film content. That's what I'll do. And my, bassist Devin is an incredible editor. He helps edit the content. And then we have an automated posting system where it'll post, you can kind of schedule. It's called Buffer. That way I don't have to, be messing with it during my work hours. And, for stuff like talking to folks, like yourself, that's why I like to schedule things either during my lunch break or after work. It's a dance every day. And it is hard. But once you make the sacrifices that you need to, and you get in kind of the groove and figure out what works for you and what doesn't, it's like any other habit.
That's why you call it a habit. Because at times I feel like at times this does feel like a habit doing this. Like this to me, I've said it countless times, especially during the pandemic when I think everyone was looking for more of a personal connection because we realized so much of our lives are led digitally, that doing things like this, like I had the nice escape where it's like 2, 3, 4 times a week. Like I'm getting to talk to people and getting my social batteries kind of recharged, where I think a lot of people were like, oh shit, I don't have friends really that exist like in a non-digital way. So like usually like I hit up people, we go somewhere like a group of whatever, and then we all hang out and just sit on our phones collectively in the same room. But like it was funny to me to see how doing this, I had the same problem. Like, I have to do it sometimes on my lunch break. Like, thankfully, not thankfully, but I had foot surgery a couple of weeks ago. So, like, I have a lot of downtime to just be available to do this, which has been great. But it's funny when I do this on lunch breaks and stuff, and people are like, why are you doing it on your lunch break? I'm like, it's the only time I had. Like, I got to make it work where it makes sense for me. So, but I think it speaks to more of the commitment to understanding, like, I have an opportunity and I don't want to squander it because of something as selfish or silly as, like, I couldn't make the time. And I think, kind of going back to what I was saying, I think that's something I realize speaks volumes, is what people are willing to do with their time, because we all have the same amount. But if people aren't willing to make the time for you or for other things, then I guess it shows whether it's important to them, or more importantly to you, if you're willing to do that and make those sacrifices.
Yeah. And that's also another dance. You do have to prioritize and make the time, and understand that sometimes you're not going to get a break during certain, like, ebb and flows. Sometimes you're going to have really, really busy times, and just understand that it's going to be that's going to be a difficult time. But it is important to also make time to rest and recuperate, because the creativity or lack thereof, when you don't actually give yourself time to rest, shows. In my opinion, at least, it shows in my work and in my performance when I don't give myself time to rest. So it's still, really important to save that, as impossible as it feels in this day and age to actually do that.
How long did it take you to kind of figure out the balance, and figure out, I hate to say it so blankly like this, but the things that your non-negotiables, I guess, for yourself? Like, how hard was it to kind of figure those out?
I think I'm still figuring that out. I don't think I realized how burnt out I am by stuff until I just happened to get a free day, and I'm like, holy shit, I needed this. Like, a good example was when we specifically planned to go black on socials, like completely blackout socials, not post for a while. I was like, holy shit, I needed this break. Like, I needed this. So I'm still figuring that out, and I'm great at giving that advice, but not very good at taking it myself. And it's still something that I'm learning. So yeah.
It's funny you say that. I was talking with a friend the other day, doing one of these, and we were talking about how this person and I are pretty good at reading people. Like, first judgments of people are pretty spot on. But then we were like, there's been a few times where people will surprise you. Like, they'll kind of keep coming back, and you're like, oh, you're not an asshole like I thought you were. And then the thing that you latch onto when you realize that it's not, is the thing that you are trying to work on yourself. So it's kind of like a blind spot where you're like, oh, I don't really like this part of me, and I'm projecting it onto you as a thing I don't like, but really we're very similar. So it's kind of funny that the thing I didn't like about you initially, I probably was projecting onto you and being like, oh yeah, I'm trying to mask that in me. So it's kind of funny when you get those situations and kind of self-audit, I guess, and you're just kind of like, oh, it's a me thing, not a you thing.
Yeah, for sure.
How has the response to all the singles? Because it's funny, like, going through, your socials specifically, and like, or maybe it was the band's, but you were talking about, like, we got a tour announcement. I know that's very weird. We don't have an album, and you're asking, how are we going to tour when we don't have more music and things like that. Are you surprised at how fast everything is happening, and how much demand there is for more songs, to see you live, and all these things?
Honestly, one thing about me is I'm pretty delusional. Like, and I think that's been quite successful for me. Like, I'll be like, okay, yeah, I think Babylon should have 1 million streams by now. That's how good of a song I think it is. And, like, obviously that's such a big ask, right? But, like, everybody's like, just, be realistic. And don't get me wrong, like, a lot of times I am wrong about stuff, and I have to, mellow out my expectations, but my hopes are always, like, up here. So my answer to that is usually, like, I don't think people are asking for new music enough. I think they need to go stream the rest of it a ton and get the hype back up, and then we can get the algorithm going again. And, like, things are going fast, but our manager has been so incredible at letting us know, like, when things are going to pick up and when things are going to be kind of a lull, or a bit easier time-wise. I am in shock of how fast everything has moved for gore in general. Every single friend that I have in the industry was like, don't expect to go on tour for the next 2 to 3 to 5 years. Don't expect to blow up overnight. Don't expect any labels to talk to you for a few years, blah, blah, blah. And like everything that they said not to expect happened. So I've been learning a crash course on how to be a musician. And I hope that I'm doing a good job of that. Because I've been in like local bands, sure, but I've never been in anything like this,
So I guess that this kind of presents a fun opportunity to kind of, I've been trying to be more cognizant of people that listen to this, maybe are probably in bands themselves. And one of the things they want is, not saying that there's like, you've seen that meme where it's like, oh, I want to fuck being a local band, just skip over 7 steps literally and just be like an arena sized band, not doing any of the things that it takes to get there. So I realize like I have an interesting perspective to talk to like yourself and have maybe some advice be given to people who are listening to try to navigate, getting signed in this business that we both find ourselves in. But how did you know when you were ready for the manager, for signing with the label, what you were looking for? What were the things that you knew when it was time to move forward with these things? How did you know?
So with a manager, I was kind of blessed with that during a time where I was about to take a very bad predatory deal, and I'm not going to name names or anything, but I was about to take a deal that was really bad for the band, and I had no idea. And so I had, musician friends coming in, with their insight and helping me. And then through that, I met managers, and then I met my management agency, who are the best ever. Unbiased. Like they do, everybody's like, what do managers do? I'm like, everything, everything that you can't, so that, especially when we started getting labels coming to us, I didn't know what I was getting myself into. So, that was a good time to meet good managers. And that luckily kind of fell into my lap from the friends that I have, in the industry. And then, you mentioned a couple of other things like the label, had a lot of people's opinions coming at me about, the label, which is not a bad thing. Like, there are friends that are like, oh, I'm in a label and it's really helped me. It's very successful. And I'm really happy that I did. And being independent just can't get you certain things that a label can. And then I've had people tell me I've gotten totally fucked over by a label, and they've basically taken my money, not done anything with it. And so you hear all these things, and it's going to sound cheesy, but a woman's intuition is pretty, I've noticed it's pretty strong. Pretty much every woman that I've ever met, they've had a gut feeling about something. It's usually been right, more or less. And I had a really strong gut feeling about Spine Farm, specifically the people that I'm working with in there, our team in Spine Farm. I was like, I know that they actually give a shit about gore, and they're not just saying that. Like, these are genuine people, and they're gonna help us, So it was following my gut, and because I always like to please people, so I had to learn to just like not just take everybody's advice just because they gave it to me, and be like, hey, I respect your advice, but this is the path that I'm taking,
Yeah, I think because it's funny, like the other person I was talking with about a week ago, Chris Kelly, that's not in a big band, that he's in a band that you can't mention because he's not mentioned officially as a member of that band, but we'll just say that they are it's a metal group with a bunch of Chinese women, I think, or Japanese women that's in the metal scene, if that helps you. Yeah. So anyway, like and he's got a newer band that he started with some friends. And so like the thing that we were kind of discussing at this point was how, we didn't want to take a manager because a manager was going to take more money than we have currently, because we're not really bringing in any revenue. And we didn't want to sign with a label because again, we didn't want to have concessions being made to our whatever. So it gets kind of interesting when you start breaking these things down of like, there are people who, like yourself, like Chris, and a lot of other people, I think, who are trying to figure out in this day and age, where do we fit? What do we need? What don't we need? And I think there's so many opinions, one way, shape, or another, about how to traverse the industry, that it gets so interesting, because I don't think there's any one inherently right or wrong way to do it. It's kind of tailored around what do you want and what are you looking for, I guess. And so it's always kind of interesting to me, because I feel like when you talk to any band, oh, I want to get signed. Okay, well, what is being signed going to do for you? What does it bring you that you can't do yourself? And a lot of times I feel like the more successful bands I see are ones that have either can do a lot of it themselves and don't need to rely on others, or those that have a very clear understanding of what they want, both in like from management, from labels, all this kind of stuff, to even, I know what I want my band to sound like. I know it's all mapped out. And I feel like a lot of times you get one or the other. You don't kind of have people who know both, where they're like, this is what I'm looking for, and I know personally this is where I want us to go and how to get there. And so I think it's kind of fun to talk to people about, how do you navigate that? How do you figure out what you're looking for? Because I think in the day and age of where people can see dollar signs off of you and profiting off of you, it's hard to know what's real and what's not, and what are you being sold that's just full of shit just to get you. So we can, there's another band and now they're paying me, 15% of whatever. So traversing that, I think, is really interesting in how people go about it. But I would agree with you. I think a lot of people I know that are on Spine Farm have nothing but great things to say about the label and the people that work there. So it's seemingly, from my perspective, with a lot of the artists that I talk to from that label, they are killing it right now, which is great, because I think we have seen too many stories of, the Victory Records. I don't mind saying that since it's out there, but like Victory Records, where people were just signing shit deals and then you're getting sued, and now it's costing you your livelihood once you finally made one. So it's like, these are decisions that you tend to make at a very young part of either your life or your career that impacts so much of everything moving forward, that I just don't think a lot of people maybe take it to heart, that it is as important as it really is, to make sure you're making the right decisions.
Yeah. And I suppose for that reason, I get, label versus independent. Like, there are good independent bands out there who are making it for themselves, but yeah, not having a manager, I don't know how the hell you do that. Unless, I don't know how in what world that would work. I mean, obviously I have a job outside of this, a full-time one. Maybe if you don't and you have the connections and the tools, sure. My management absolutely deserves the pay that they get. So, like, really good management, you'll be like, yeah. You'll be like, no, no hesitation to pay for their work. That's how I feel about mine.
Something kind of shifting gears just a little bit. So this is going to be a very weird way to say this. So I'll preface by saying, so like, my wife works at a pharmaceutical company here in town, and has, been and worked her way up over the 14 years almost that she's been there to being one of the top people at her job. But it's funny, because when they see her out at like shows and stuff like that, they're like, I didn't think you really liked this, or like this style of music or whatever. And it's interesting to just kind of see the duality of like work life versus your personal life. And especially like when they see me, they're like, oh, I didn't expect this to be your husband, all heavily tattooed and stuff. Like, I very much stick out like a sore thumb when we go to company functions. So it's a thing for me. Like, I would imagine aerospace engineering probably is, correct me if I'm wrong, I would assume it's probably not a very women dominated part of the workforce. Mine
is. We got like 50%.
That's awesome.
Women. Yeah, it depends on what area you're working in.
Okay.
But for me, I actually am in there's a lot of women present in my specific division. And aerospace, at least in my experience, tends to be a pretty progressive subset of engineering. Whereas like the more traditional ones would be like oil and gas. Like, I don't think anybody in oil and gas would hire me with like a neck tattoo, even though like that doesn't affect like how good I am at my job. Like it's just a bit more traditional of a place to work.
Yeah. Well, okay. So that was kind of the funny thing too, is, you know, my wife, I hear her on a lot of her conference calls, and it's funny that I would say in some situations, some of her meetings that I hear her in, it's probably mostly women dominated, the meetings themselves. But what I notice, and her being with her has really like opened my eyes to this, is just how often she'll be trying to make a point, or someone on the call will be making a point, and then a dude just comes in and just steamrolls over them and like says nothing essentially. And you're like, the fuck was that? Like, and it's kind of crazy and weird to see that. But the other part of it, and this is kind of where I was going to go, because I know how kind of unfairly I get judged for my tattoos. And granted, I chose them. You know, it's not anyone else's fault or anything, but it's interesting to see how in some industries we are still seeing judgments on outward appearance, and this belief that your gender or your race or whatever makes you lesser than other people. So I kind of had wondered if you experience a lot of that in your profession, and or do you get a lot of surprise comments when people, like when at your day job, people are like, oh, you're in a band, what do you do? And you're like, oh, here's my band. And they probably would be like, I didn't expect that out of you. Like, do you get a lot of that, or is that kind of getting out of that now that we're in a more progressive time and space?
I was gonna say, I don't ever get judged for my appearance or anything like that at work. Like, I think I've had like one guy look at me funny, and I was like, you out of all people, you know, for real. But I don't. He's kind of a class clown, so I was like, really, like me for real. But I don't get. I think the people in my job are such overperformers in every aspect of life that they're also very good at being respectful or for the most part. I don't really feel like I get, you know, talked over or disregarded at my work because I'm a woman. Not at least in my division. Now, I have worked with other people before who I don't work with, you know, kind of like outsourcing kind of things or going outside of my division. And I have experienced that, but you're just going to experience people like that in general. I don't think it necessarily has anything to do with my work. I've had men say many much worse things to me, you know, and other places. But I actually think, which I think is going to surprise people, because I think a lot of people positively praise me because I'm a woman in metal. But I actually have dealt a lot with men talking over me and disregarding my opinion or my creative ideas that I'm working with. Especially, you know, when you got like a few guy friends that all work together, it's like, well, you know, they just automatically go on autopilot. Don't listen to me. And just start, you know, like, I feel like I deal with that more in music, actually. And it's because you don't necessarily, you know, a lot of people don't necessarily learn a professional mindset as a skill. So
I think what's been kind of crazy to me, thinking about like the almost 8 years of doing this show, is I feel like, from my perspective, the amount of women I see in all facets, between tour managing, you know, being in bands, teching, management, publicist side, whatever, it feels like it's a lot more women dominant now, especially in this kind of scene. That it's kind of surprising to me that I feel like that people are like, oh, I didn't think you were like, famously, like a couple of months ago, I went to go visit a friend on a tour, and one of the ladies that was on the tour was the tour managing the whole fucking thing. And I watched an interaction with one of the venue guys being like, oh, do you have your pass? Who are you? What are you doing? And she's like, no girlfriends. You have to go to the front, grab your ticket and all this shit. She's like, I'm the fucking tour manager. And like, here's my pass and like all this shit. And I was just like, damn, I didn't really expect there to still kind of be that, because it's just not what I experience day to day. And like I said, like whenever I go to shows, my wife's always with me. So it's like having that is kind of like it's 100% like my day to day in this scene. So it's like, I'm not surprised by it, but I'm surprised when I hear that there are still people dealing with it and I still see it. And you're just like, are you fucking kidding me? So it's it's a thing, and I know it's like super cliche to kind of, whenever you have someone on to kind of be like, oh, women in metal, how is it? Is it hard? Is all this shit. I'm not really interested in that. I just think it's more of a, everyone's experiences are different. And to me, the reason why I brought it up was more your actual job. I don't know much about it, and I don't know much about the space itself. And so to me, the cliche thing in my head is based on what I see in like movies and shit. And so obviously I know that women are in this space, but it's like in my head, it's still probably a more nerdier man centric thing. Like maybe it's just because I watched like Silicon Valley and I know that's not the same space, but I think that those people that are represented in that show is what I imagine your coworkers to be like, where it's just a bunch of people who aren't, again, judging, but like probably aren't as social as others, because their job is so demanding that the time it takes to learn everything and just get to where you are kind of probably requires a lot more out of you and your day-to-day and your personal time than a lot of other jobs, I would say. And so that's why I was just kind of like, how is that? Plus I'm picking up on you saying you kind of are a little bit more of an introverted kind of homebody, like don't have many friends. So I'm wondering if maybe that's a byproduct of your sacrifices you made in your personal, professional life as well to get there.
Yeah. I mean, I have a close circle, or not many people in my circle. That's a choice that has to be made when you are working 2 jobs and one of them is music and you actually want to make it a career at some point. Like it's just part of it. And some people are going to understand that, some are not. It's just how it goes. But to answer your question, yes, like it is harder, I would say a little bit mentally I'd argue that it is a bit harder. In some ways, probably easier in others. I guarantee you there's some dudes that listen to my band. Sorry, there's a guy weed whacking outside. Perfect timing. But there are people that probably look at my stuff a bit more because I'm a woman. But also being a woman is literally all it takes to go from, oh, your band sucks, to I hope that you die burning by fire. Just because I'm a chick. I've had people tell me that I should be burned alive, that I should die alone. And you just don't see those comments going to men because they decided to be in a metal band. It's just women. Like, let's be real.
That's so weird.
Yeah.
I don't know. I like it. I'm sorry you have to go through that. Like, that's.
I've tough skin,
just
so
for
it's fine.
choosing.
It's usually just funny.
No, I know, but I mean, like that. It's shitty that like. It's shitty that like we exist in this space where I feel like I said kind of earlier, and sort of the crux of a lot of this thing is just sort of our online digital presence and so forth. But it's this thing where I'm shocked that like someone simply existing and doing something that they have been inspired and feel the calling to do. What is going on with all of my shit? It's just these series popping up now and like trying to answer my question. But it was a thing where in listening to all of these things, it's like, I grew up in being taught, if you don't like something, just fucking pay it no mind. The amount of people, and like I get it on a very minute scale of doing this show, where people will leave just shithead comments and you're just like, why? Like, were you so compelled that like I bothered you so bad that you had to type something out? Like, what did it do? And it just creates this sense of like, I don't know. It's fucking wild to me that someone, instead of being inspired, that like, here's someone who is in a very, again, presumably a very hard profession to go into, and you've made it there, and now you're doing something else that you're passionate about, and you're sacrificing a lot of things. These are how I would look at it and be like, you know what? I'm fucking inspired by that. There's something else I want to do, or maybe I should be doing more in my own life because there's someone who's clearly able to maintain and do all these things. That would be my takeaway from it. Not fuck you, I hope you die in a fire. Like, why? Like, I don't know. I just don't understand how you get to that level to where that's where you think like, here's what I can put my best foot forward with this.
You hate your life. That's the only answer.
I guess.
Answer. Anybody that's happy will not say stuff like that to people. You have to be truly miserable to take your time out of your day to comment that. And unfortunately, it's a good thing because that's the kind of stuff that boosts the algorithm. Like Instagram eats up hate comments. That report button doesn't fucking do anything. Like,
no, it doesn't.
Let's be real. Like the hate comments are what gets stuff. Like I remember when I posted there's this one reel that I did, and it was just silly. There was this girl, I did a stitch with this girl, and she said men don't like loud women, and then I started doing metal vocals over it. It's not deep. It's not deep. I'm not saying that men's opinions don't matter. I'm just doing metal vocals. It is a way to push my craft, right? Oh my God, the comments. Actually, she speaks for all of us, and I hope that you die alone with cats. You know, and then of course women coming in being like, I would love to die alone with cats. I don't like men. Which is just like this gender war going on in my comments, and I'm like, literally all I did was a fucking guttural. That's all I did. Like, it's like, what is happening? So it boosts the algorithm, so I'm not going to complain. But it can be, especially when people just straight up lie. They're like, you know, say straight up lies. And unfortunately, I'm not going to go and be like, that's not true, because it just looks stupid and it doesn't matter. Right. You know, that's I think the one thing that irks me is when people just make assumptions that make me sound bad because it's what they want and it's not true, you know.
You just said something and it kind of got my brain going for a minute. Do you feel like, because you made the comment about how like there's basically kind of a gender war starts in your comments based on essentially what is you doing music related things, content. Do you feel like that exists in any other space? Like you said that, and like the first thing I thought it was, I was like, I wonder if, okay. Like I'm trying to think of like literally anything else where it would exist.
I think there's a constant gender war happening right now, and that's like not too music related, but I think both men and women feel very disrespected, and rather than actually growing the hell up, a lot of people will just blame everything on an entire sex, you know, and you just have people running their mouths online, and there's like I think there's just a huge gender war in general, and I think it's wild to be nice. But yeah, I don't think it's just metal. I think it's everywhere.
It's just one of those things, like you said that, and it just like kind of like an epiphany. Like I was like, and I don't know why this is the first person that came to mind. I was like, what if Michelle Obama, like when she posts things, it just turns into like gender war in her comments, or like just these different, like, you know, like if, I don't know, like I'm trying to think of like different women in like bigger, you know, power and so forth, that like, is this what it turns into for them? Even if it's like political, or if it's, you know, an art, like a painter or whatever, like, does it always just for them devolve into that? It'd be interesting to kind of see. Yeah, and I'm not going to sit here
and be like, oh, poor me, I'm a woman and men pick on me. Like I've seen women put ghastly things on the internet too. Like it's both, you know? But yeah. I used to have a joke. Men will fuck with each other until we fight, and then we squash it. For the most part, women will fuck with each other until one of them gets an eating disorder and their credibility is just shot to shit. Yeah, evil.
But evil. I also blame my wife for watching all the housewomen shows of whatever city, to where I like kind of formulated that plan.
I know. Trash TV. My brain is going all day, every day. I help run a band. I'm an engineer. If I want to watch TV, I want to be a vegetable. I want to be brain dead.
That's what my wife said. And I'm always just like, for someone that doesn't like drama in your own life, or this is not the life you live, it is infinitely fascinating to me that you come home and you're like easy, like on decompressing TV is like Teen Mom, which is also something you never wanted, which is kids. Like you watch entertainment of shit that you don't like or want any part of your life, but that is the entertainment you seek out. It's so interesting to me to watch that from afar and just be like, why? But then she said the same thing one day. She's like, my job, like I am on phone calls all day. I'm putting out fires. Like all I want is just mindlessly numbing TV that I can just sit back and be like, whatever. So it's interesting to hear that you're sort of maybe in the same boat.
You know, it's like, I get it. I don't think there's any, I mean, you could argue that there's something wrong with that, but I don't really, whatever. If you're making a positive contribution to society 70% of the time and the other 30 you're watching brain dead TV, okay, whatever. You're still making the world a better place, I'd argue.
Yeah. There was an evening a couple of years ago during the pandemic when they were making one of the vaccines at the time, and there was a different vaccine. I forget what disease it was kind of going toward, but it was still in the clinical trial phase. And essentially my wife had to be on a phone call where like the person was like, you're literally fucking killing people right now. I'm like not getting this out in time or having problems with it. And she was just like, it's not passing regular, like it's not passing. Like, so yeah, you want it to get done faster, but like in the grand scheme of things, like I'm not pushing out a product that is going to do more damage for it not being done correctly. But it's like, those are like the sides of that shit that it's like, you know, I remember when everyone was given a bunch of grief about like the vaccines and, you know, all this kind of stuff. And even with like the EpiPen, which I think they were trying to make a generic version of, that's what it was, the EpiPen. And it was the thing where it's like, you know, she comes home crying after a day of getting berated by someone who's just passionate about their thing and just wants the thing.
Right.
Which like, you know, it's the hard part. Yeah. But it's those things I think like when I saw what you did for a job, like in my head, I kind of maybe just started paralleling a lot of like what my wife goes through and the stresses of her job. And I was shit, I imagine like it's taken most of the time that I've been with her to kind of have a basic understanding of what she does and what the job entails. I have no idea what yours is. And it sounds infinitely harder and more stressful. So again, kind of projecting what I experience onto the hypothetical version of you before I even talked to you, it was just like, fuck, man, I don't know how you do it. I don't know how you are able to balance both because I see what it's doing. I mean, with my wife over the 14 years we've been together. So it's like, I can't imagine throwing at her, hey, now you've got a band that's about to, it's starting, the machine's starting behind it. Let's fucking go. And it'd be like, how are you, like, I could just see her breaking down and be like, I can't do both. Something's got to give. And so to me,
I break
like,
down all the time. Don't worry. Break down all the time.
So I was going to say, to me, it's a thing where looking at you and like I said, with not having a whole lot of information, a lot of the questions and things that I started kind of going through was more of like projecting my wife's life onto you and kind of being like, I don't know how you do it. It sounds inspiring though, and I want to learn more about you and how you do it, because I feel like a lot of your life probably is very compartmentalized based on how my wife does a lot of things where it's scheduled to a fucking T. And when it's not, and the chaos of not having things planned out stresses her the fuck out. Which is where I kind of thrive in, of just living in I just roll with shit and whatever we do is what we do.
Yeah.
But I would imagine, okay. So I was going to say that there's a good question. That sounds like that's more how you are.
The day and the rest of the week.
How has that been for you to navigate an industry where it's a lot of hurry up and wait and things can literally change just like that, even with your best plans laid out?
I've had to learn to be more patient for sure.
Okay.
And even then, like, it's so crazy because I can be impatient, yet the band stuff has moved faster than 99.9% of new bands. And I still find myself being impatient sometimes. It is just shifting your brain, because really understanding that the music industry works vastly different than the engineering industry is just, it's crucial. Otherwise I'll lose my sanity. Truly. And one thing that I've learned in my job, like my day job, is like, you can always be working on something. Like, you could take a break or you could do something else. Like, we just have a lot of, and it's not that like my job pushes that, it's that we ourselves, the employees, are like overdoers and like overachievers. And so I've kind of adopted that in my like music mindset, where I'm like, oh, well, okay, this isn't going, but I guess I could make more content for the upcoming song right now, or do this, or get ahead on this, which is good, right? But then also, where do I live life in all of that? Sometimes.
If you don't mind me asking, what do you do when you shut down? Or I don't want to say shut down, because I know I don't ever shut shit down until literally taking an edible to go to bed, and then it's like everything slows down at a normal pace, I think, mentally for me. How do you unwind? What is it that you do when you have or allot yourself the free time to just not be working on either profession? What is it that you do to find?
I hang out
comfort?
with my loved ones, whether it be my family or my boyfriend. I take my dogs on walks. Like, I do very simple things that make life beautiful itself. Is just like being around loved ones. not feeling like I have to achieve anything or do anything. Like, I'm sure as hell not going to add another hobby to the list, because I just know I'm going to want to achieve whatever. And then, like, no, I'm not doing that. You know, I'll do something that I can just exist, like, you know, hang out with my loved ones or walk my dog. But even then I'm like, I got to get 3 miles in. It's like, oh my God, just walk the dog. You don't have to make it this achievement that you walked your dog 3 miles. Yeah. Look, don't be like me, y'all. Don't be like me.
It's funny in talking to you. I very much get a sense of a lot of me and a lot of my wife, and it's almost like the hybrid of the two of us. I feel like is you in the short time of talking to you, because like so like I said, I had foot surgery a couple of weeks ago, and then I had found out I had high blood pressure, so I had to deal with that all at the same time. So I just have been doing a bunch of doctor's appointments the last like 2 weeks, 3 weeks in surgery, and they were like, well, your blood pressure meds are working, we'd kind of like to see you get a little bit closer. And I was like, well, I don't think upping the dosage yet right now seems right, because like I'm sitting all day, so I'm not getting my 30-40 minute dog walks 2 to 3 times a day. I'm not getting, you know, I'm not working at my factory where I'm walking all over the place that like can maybe help me do these things. Would it be advantageous maybe to see how this goes once we get some more data involved, when I'm back to like fully function and can walk at least some way? And it was funny to kind of tell a professional doctor this thing. I'm like, I think that's a really rational way to approach this. And I'm like, okay. Because like I was like, in my head, I've been stressing about telling you this, because I was like, I don't feel like I need to up my meds yet. I know we're not quite where I want to be, but I still think these other factors. And it's like, that's not probably a way that most people would think internally, but it's like right now all I can do is sit and think, essentially. So it's like I said, I'm in my head
Yeah.
most of the day, just kind of going like, okay, now what? Oh, this is, you know, whatever, listening to podcasts, and like, and it's why I drive my wife nuts when she comes home, because I'm like, oh my God, someone to talk to. Hey, how was your day? And she's like, give me like fucking 2 minutes to sit down and like decompress. All I've had is meetings all goddamn day. And I'm like, oh, sorry. So it's funny to kind of understand and see that some people are very hyper aware and active with what they need to do, and very goal oriented, but then also very regimented in, my day looks like this, it has to look like this, and I have to complete these tasks before my day's done. So I know it's a struggle at times to not feel like you're, you know, making a challenge of everything in your life, because it's like, oh, that's sort of how we, at a certain age, I think we were all kind of raised, like video game culture or whatever.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean,
just, you know, capitalism. I'm not gonna about to get into like anti or pro capital. I'm just saying society is a bunch of achievers. Not get into that. I'm just saying, like, our success is based on how much we do in our world.
Yeah. I mean, I was looking at my wife's phone the other day, and she had like 200 and something emails, and I think like 14 or 15 text messages and shit. And I was like, how it gives me anxiety. Please click. She goes, some of them are just spam. I was like, fucking get rid of them. And then I was talking with her about it.
I won't need to read, you know?
Yeah, but it was the thing where I realized in this conversation with her, I was like, oh my God, we're so regimented to be task oriented people. And I was like, I think like that's why, at least for me, when I look at my phone, I'm like, there's no notifications, no nothing, because like I've completed all my tasks, at least in as much as they are for a phone that it's whatever. But it's interesting to me, because like when I kind of put that together, I was like, you're so regimented in your day to day. Why aren't you like, okay, this 10-15 minutes is meant for cleaning out emails? And she was like, I don't know, I don't care. And I was like, it's so weird how the things you do and don't care about. But like, I called her a monster for having 200 unread emails. I was like, please just fucking go through those, or like turn off the like turn that off for the weekend, like your work emails. So like
easy
it's
to get
just
those in like a day. Like you can get 200 emails in a day easy, or like in an evening. Crazy. So.
How many of your emails or how many of your phone calls could have been solved in an email?
I actually think my job, like people in my job are really good about. I think there's a lot of meetings that could have been just phone calls or emails. Like there's some meetings where I'm like, I don't know if this necessarily needed to be a meeting, but that happens all the time. I wouldn't say a lot though. I'd say we're pretty good at deciding those things. But you know how I told you that I can be flexible? I lied. See, I'm like, yeah, I got time. It gets taken immediately.
That's how it goes. So you're saying you gotta go back to work?
Yeah, I got my cutoff.
Okay.
But you have time for like any other one or two more questions if you have them. Just I gotta leave it.
No, I can. Yep. No, I can wrap it up real quick with the last question and then the plugging of socials and so forth. The thing we've been talking about quite a bit. Obviously the EP is coming out in a few months as of when we're doing this. The thing I kind of like asking people, you as the artist get to sit with this music for a while before sharing it with all of us for a multitude of reasons. What are you most excited for people to hear on the stuff that hasn't come out? Because I'm sure you've been sitting on some of these songs for a little while.
Yeah. So the last song on the EP is actually the first Gore song ever written. And that's my favorite Gore song. It is not what people are going to expect though. It's not like a metal song, it's just, it's beautiful. It's gorgeous. It makes me want to cry every time I listen to it and look at the visualizer. Like, it's gorgeous. And I felt that way about Babylon, and then the last song on the EP are both my favorite Gore songs ever. And of course there's a couple on, future stuff that hasn't been mastered yet, but I won't even talk about those yet until they're, until they're mastered. But yeah, there's and obviously I can't expect people to connect with it the way that I do. I'm still shocked that people say that their favorite song is Pray and not Babylon. Like, Babylon's the best. Like, I feel like I'm a fan of my own music. So it's like, how do they think that Doomsday is the best song or whatever? Like, I love Doomsday, but I'm such a crazy fan about my own music too, where I'm like, well, I like the chorus in Doomsday, but I like the breakdown and Pray. Talking to people wait, this is all my music. What am I doing? How am I I'm just such a fan of, I'm just such a strong opinionated fan about my own music. So yeah.
Well, I mean, if you're not, how do you expect anyone else to be?
Exactly. You can't expect anybody to want it more than you. So.
Right. Well, I'm hoping, obviously, I'm going to assume when the EP comes out, there'll be more than 5 dates. So those of us that don't just live in those 5 cities can actually see the band perform live.
Hey,
but
I hope so too. I hope there's more.
But where can everyone find you or anything you would like to plug online?
Yeah. So just, keep seeking us out on DSPs. We're on Spotify. If you haven't seen the Babylon music video yet, it's probably one of the greatest things I've ever done. And, just keep a lookout. I mean, October 24th is not far at all.
Nope.
It's very close. So how everybody was complaining that Gore wasn't putting out music fast enough? Well, now they're going to be like, whoa, I thought you just released Babylon. What's happening? So be ready.
Awesome. Looking forward to it. And like I said, looking forward to probably 2025 being a year where you're going to see a lot more from you, from the band and all that kind of stuff. So very much looking forward to it. Thank you for the time on your lunch break. I know it's weird being on the other side of this where you're doing it on someone else's work day. But thank you very much for taking the time, and we'll chat soon, hopefully down the road.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
So that was my conversation with Hayley. Want to thank her once again for taking the time on her lunch break to do the chat. It's funny. I joked in real time during the episode that I'm the one that's used to having to take my lunch break to do these. So to have a guest do it really meant a lot, because obviously time is short. We all get the same amount of time, but everyone's days are jam-packed with working and trying to do a million other things. So to have her take her lunch break to do this chat really meant a lot to me. It's funny. I've really been thinking about this episode for quite a bit, for a multitude of reasons. And, I addressed one of them in the intro, but something I just keep coming back to these 2 thoughts as I think about this band and why they have me excited and why I think they have a lot of people excited about their future. And one of them is kind of a weird story, but it's the only one I keep coming back to this thing. And I remember being in high school in homeroom, and I remember going to one of our friends, and I just hear him blasting this loud, abrasive ass music out of his shitty fucking headphones, these KOSS headphones, KOSS, if anyone remembers those. And they were mostly giant, shitty, I don't even know what that material technically is, but they were like the padding, but they were so big and obnoxious. And then like the metal connector between the two headphoney things. But I remember him like taking it off. He's like, yo, it's this new band that just came out called Slipknot. And he puts on, I think it was literally Sick, and like starts the record and plays. And I'm like, what the fuck is this? And I remember just being so like enamored by it because it just sounded like nothing I had really heard. But at times I was able to be like, okay, clearly here's an influence. It's just done in a way I don't understand and I don't know yet because it's so new. And to me, I remember like the excitement of that record, getting it, being excited, learning all the songs, all the parts, getting like the deluxe edition and hearing demos and all this kind of stuff. And I remember a handful of us music fans being really excited about what was going to be next. Where does this band go from this insane fucking record? Where do you go from here? What do you like? You have turntables, you have guitar solos, you have like all these different parts. What can this band possibly do to push their sound and evolve even more from here? More to the point, too, at this point, the band had started touring more consistently, so all you heard about was how crazy the live shows were and how crazier they were getting. And I feel like as I think about that, as I think about Gore, that's the memory that comes to me because I feel sort of the same thing internally where it's like, we have the EP, but where's the band going to go from here? What is the band got cooking? Where are they going to push themselves and their sound moving forward? And to me, as a fan of music, especially when you get into a band so early on, it just... That's the good stuff. That's the thing that makes you realize like you do give a shit about these things. You know, I've constantly talked on this about how sometimes I kind of fall out of love of heavy music or the genre. And a lot of it is more so the fan base and the constant bitching and shit back and forth online that kind of drives me nuts and kind of makes me not want to check out things. But it's a band like this that makes you excited and finds that passion again for something and makes you realize that in spite of all these things, this is what it's all about. The other story that kind of comes to mind when I think of this band and the excitement that I have around it is sort of actually something that I'm about to go do, which is to go see Knocked Loose later this week as of when I'm recording this. And the thing with Knocked Loose that's been really interesting, and I know I've talked about part of this on here, is, you know, they do a really great job of honoring the bands that took them out before while also still kind of extending the ladder down to the underground scene they kind of came from. So they're kind of existing in the best of both of these worlds. But something else that they've been doing a lot lately too, I think, is branching out beyond their own scene, beyond their own genre even. And recently, some of the touring they've done, they had Danny Brown come out, the rapper from Detroit. And Danny Brown's a fucking wild dude. I don't know if anyone who listens to the show actually listens to Danny Brown or has seen him perform, but dude's wild. He has energy that's not I would say what most people would think of a rap show to be. So it was a thing to me where seeing that, it's like, that's cool because now you're starting to introduce something that was around when I was starting to go to shows as a kid, mixed bills, where you would get maybe a death metal band with a ska band with a like shoegazy weird like indie rock band. And like those are the kind of shows I was going to, even going to like house shows where it was like, well, I'm friends with this dude and he's got like a tech death band, and you know, then I got a DJ friend and we're gonna do a house show, and it's like, you know, we got a keg, it's $10, come, and the vibe is just fun and it's cool and everyone supports everyone. And to me, I feel like that's the other thing with Gore that has me excited, because I feel like they could be sort of that gateway band for somebody, whether, you know, they get put on a package where maybe they are the heaviest band on the bill, and someone might be like, I didn't think I liked heavy music, but I like what Gore does. But then I could also see them being on something where it's more predominantly heavy bands, and maybe they're the lighter band, and maybe someone's like, oh, I didn't think I liked things like this. I think bands like Gore are really important for that, where it's like they can traverse and touch so many people because of they're not really bound to a style or a genre. So to me, that kind of also really has me excited to see what the future holds for this band in a multitude of different facets within their career. So all of that said, let's start wrapping up the episode. If you like to keep up with Gore, it's real simple. You can go to a Linktree. Basically, it's Linktree gore.theband. It's in the show notes. It's literally, if you go to any of their social media, it's in all of their bios and all that kind of stuff. But for sake of ease, if you don't want to look at anywhere and you just want me to tell you, Facebook and Instagram are at gore.theband, and Twitter is at gore.theband. If you'd like to keep up with Hayley, you can find her on Instagram at gore.hayley. And if you'd like to keep up with the podcast, you can find a simple enough Brewspeak Pod on all your major social media platforms. Rate, review, subscribe if you can do any of those things on whatever you are listening to this on. That is greatly appreciated. It's been crazy to see all the people sharing episodes lately. The Revis episode from last week has been making the rounds. I can definitely tell that it's from people who don't necessarily listen to the show, which is fine. That's why I enjoy doing some of these outlier episodes to the main demographic of who listens to this show. But that's always kind of been the crux of this show too, is I like talking to different people, and I enjoy a wide variety of music. So to have people maybe who aren't familiar with somebody or who they are or what they've done, or, you know, a new and upcoming band or whatever, like I feel like you get a little bit of everything on this show. I feel I'd also be remiss not to shout out Rockabilia. As always, rockabilia.com, head on over there. Speaking of a wide array of genres, a wide array of artists and styles and things aplenty, you will find pretty much anything music related over there. There's some stuff coming up very soon that I'm interested to see the reaction to. I know I've kind of teased some things the last month or so, but obviously the holidays are here. The Halloween collaborations were crazy. Some of the bands that they were getting to work with. Obviously Christmas is getting ready to come. So you know there's going to be different kinds of stocking stuffers and all kinds of holiday, probably ugly sweatshirt thingies. I'm sure they have so many different things up their sleeves over there at Rockabilia. So head on over there, support them for supporting us. Use our code BREWtally at checkout and take 10% off your total purchase order. And for the Brewtally Speaking podcast, I am John, and I will see you all next week, where I have Jack from 156 Silence joining me. That was a fun one right outside of when they were in Detroit before a show. So looking forward to getting that one out to you, and another great band. If you are not familiar with them, I think you're going to enjoy that one. And you have a week now to get familiar with their latest record. And I will see you all next week. Enjoy the rest of yours.